So here's a fun way you can learn your why. It's called a friends exercise. Do this with a best friend, somebody who loves you, who will be there for you. They'll pick up the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning and you would do the same for them. And ask them this simple question.
Why are we friends?
And they're going to look at you like you're nuts, because the part of the brain that controls that deep feeling of love and trust doesn't control language. It's a difficult question to answer. And so they'll say,
I don't know.
And so you actually stop asking the question why and you ask the question what.
What specifically is it about me that I know that you would be there for me no matter what?
And they'll start describing you.
I don't know. You're smart, you're loyal, I trust you.
Good, that's the definition of a friend. You have that with lots of people. What specifically is it about me that I know you would be there for me no matter what?
And they'll start describing themselves.
I don't know, Simon. All I know is that I can sit in a room with you. I don't even have to talk to you, and I feel inspired.
And I got goosebumps. They put the value that I have in the world into words, and I had the emotional response, because the thing that you give to the world, that you should be working to give to the world consistently, is the reason those people love you. It's the reason why you're not friends with everyone. And if you do this with multiple friends, the amazing thing is they will say very similar, if not the exact same thing, because that's the thing you give to the world. That is your why. It is the reason you get out of bed in the morning.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Hey, it's Carmichael, and I make these videos because I need them, because I want to wake up every single day and get pushed by somebody who's doing a lot more than me. And in watching their videos, it inspires me to be bolder, to have more courage, and to go chase down the life of my dreams. And I hope it does the same for you. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Simon Sinek, and my take on his top 10 rules of success. Enjoy. Rule number 2 is be a good leader.
How do leaders maintain optimism when they are tired? If you've ever been in a position of leadership, you know that leadership can be extremely lonely. Sometimes it's hard to relate to folks on your team, and you definitely can't just come to work or show up on your team and just start crying and venting. It just won't work. And so it can be kind of isolating. So one of the most important things any effective leader has to do is maintain their close friendships. You have to have people that you can go to vent, to cry, to let it all out, where it's a safe environment where you're not giving instructions or telling people this is the end of the organization, but rather you just need to get it all out of you. Have those cathartic experiences. In fact, I take it super seriously. I have a rule with my friends that there's no crying alone. And so if any one of us is ever completely overwhelmed, we call each other and say, do you have a minute? I just need to vent, or I just need to cry, or I just need to get this out. And amazingly, that gets us right back on the path of optimism. So, how do leaders maintain their ability to stay optimistic in the hardest of times? Maintain your personal relationships. Your friends will always be there for you.
Rule number 3 is embody optimism.
Optimism is different from blind positivity. Blind positivity, which a lot of leaders think they have to have all the time. They think if they're positive, then it'll make people feel better about the situation. And no matter how difficult or complex or dark times get, these leaders come to work and say, everything's good, everything's fine, we're going to be okay, everything's good. And it actually backfires. It makes things worse. Because if I'm struggling and I'm confused and I feel tension and I see my leader always positive, I think there's something wrong with me. It makes it worse. This is not optimism. Optimism is the undying belief that the future is bright. But it's realistic. It can accept that the times we are in now can be dark. We are in a dark tunnel right now. I don't know how long we're going to be in this tunnel, and it's going to be difficult. But I know one thing for sure, that if we work together and take care of each other, we will get through this and we will come out stronger than we went in. That's optimism. It's the undying belief that the future is bright and the only way to get through darkness is together. And I think any business leader worth any value today has to embody optimism. But again, it accepts the reality of difficult times now and looks to a bright future.
Rule number 4 is learn to self-evaluate.
I'm interested in how, again, our listeners could identify their characteristics and their attributes so that they can put themselves in environments where they thrive.
I mean, you have to be honest with yourself as one, which is, you don't have to beat yourself up, but you don't have to rationalize and make sure that everything's good, which is most people have some sense of self-awareness. Do you work better by yourself or on a team? You can answer that one. Do you work better under stress, or do you need time? Are you the kind of person who, you get good grades, but you need to study a lot? Or your grades are fine, but you didn't study that much? Like, I always believe grades should be ratios. It's like the grade achieved over number of hours studied.
Right. Okay.
So if you need a first and you're willing to give someone 50 hours, that's your person. But if you're willing to sacrifice quality a little bit, but you need it done in an hour, I got somebody else for you over here. Not better or worse. Different, right? And I think what we have done is we've falsely assumed that high levels of achievement is the most important. So if you get the top grades, it means you're the smartest in the room. But again, not if it took you 50 hours and I need somebody who can work under pressure.
Yeah.
Right? So most of us kind of know that. Like, how do you learn? Can you skip class and just do all the reading and you'll do well on the test? Or do you have to go to class because you have to hear it? Like, are you an oral learner or are you a visual learner? How do you take notes? All of these, I think anybody who's a little bit introspective can figure out where they did well. Like, I cannot go and I have ADHD, so reading is pointless to me. Right? In one ear and out the other. I mean, it's like, it's literally pointless. And so I still have to pass school. And so I'm a great believer that the solutions we find to the struggles we have as children become our strengths as adults. So I'm at school with ADHD. I can't read. I mean, I can physically read. I just don't comprehend.
And had it been diagnosed?
No. I didn't get diagnosed until an adult. And so many similar things, hyperactive kid who was accused of being selfish or didn't care about people because I was absent-minded. I forgot a lot of things that I was supposed to remember. And if you believe a lot of that stuff, it'll destroy your self-worth. And there were definitely moments where that happened. I'm like, oh my God, I'm a selfish, horrible human being, But thank goodness it wasn't diagnosed, because even though there were difficulties that came with it and there was definitely struggle, the hacks that I figured out because I had to pass school was I had to go to class, couldn't skip class. I needed really good teachers who were good at explaining things. I couldn't have them teach from a book because I had to enjoy myself in class. I had to go after class and talk to the teacher because the conversation helped me learn, and then I did fine, And so I got really good at asking questions and I got really good at listening. Well, look what I do for a living, right? So all of those skills were formed. And so why am I good at connecting patterns like I did with you with just a couple of examples? Well, that comes from my childhood because I had to pass the test. So I needed to get as much information from as short a period of time as I could because I got to figure this stuff out. Like, doesn't make me smarter. It just means I figured out a life hack. And I think, in this modern day and age, we're so afraid of our kids being in positions of discomfort that we're removing all the struggle. We're putting them on big pillows and saying, let me make this as easy as possible for you. Now, of course, every parent wants to make life easy. But if you talk to the quote unquote high-performing people in the world, I mean, there's that very famous story about Richard Branson, where his mum would drop him off 3 miles from home and say, see you at home. And he'd have to figure out how to get home. And she would always tell the funny story how this, whatever it was, a half an hour, 20-minute walk would take him 3 hours because he kept stopping to look at all the flowers and look at all the bugs. And now you understand a guy with a tremendous ability to solve problems and with insatiable curiosity. Well, duh. Go look at how he was raised. And you talked about it in the bully at school. Adversity is the best teacher in the world. And if we over coddle and oversimplify and then we're not allowing people to learn who they are, what they're made of. And I'm not just talking grit. That's too obvious. I'm literally mean the thing that makes you you.
Yeah.
And every single one of us, you talk to anybody who's what the world would consider high performing, assuming that they're healthy, they all overcame something. Every one of them.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there. Rule number 5 is take a break.
When should you give up a leadership position or a leadership role? Now, leadership comes at great personal sacrifice. That's part of the deal of being a leader. It's hard, it's sometimes thankless, and the reason we do it is because we believe in the cause, and we have these little glimmers that make all of that worth it. Now, the problem is, if it gets to the point where you don't feel it's worth it, or you don't feel that you can contribute, then yes, sometimes it is good to step aside from being the leader and maybe let somebody else stand in. Or if you need to take a leave of absence from that role, that works too. It is tiring, but you are not a martyr when you are a leader. You don't do it to the point of such tremendous self-sacrifice that you actually hurt yourself. Yes, you're going to go through more stress than most, but not completely to the point where it shuts down the system. So, like anything, pay attention to yourself, pay attention to your body, even just taking time off. As a leader, you can say, I'm taking a week off and I'm not checking back in. I need to reset. And by the way, that sends a remarkable message to your team. If you actually come out and say, I'm stressed out of my head and I just need to reset for a long weekend, what it says to your team is that they have permission to do the same, to come to you and say, I'm struggling, can I take a long weekend? So you're actually being a great leader by ensuring that you're taking time to look after yourself as well.
Rule number 6 is practice active listening.
Listening is a trust-building exercise, right? If you're in take it down to a personal relationship. If you've ever had a romantic relationship, a loved one, right? Making someone feel heard doesn't mean you're wrong. Saying sorry doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you take accountability for your actions. And I think it is important that we attempt to hear them. Make them feel heard. Doesn't mean we have to agree, but they have to feel heard. And, listening is not hearing the words. It's making the other person feel that they were heard. We don't get to decide when hearing has happened, when listening has happened. They do. And by the way, it's not 100% successful either, because some people are just hell-bent on, but that's a minority. And so I think the exercise is sitting down with people and say, tell me what you're going through. Tell me what you're afraid of. I want to understand, because we're trying to make everyone safe. I want to hear what your thing is. And let them tell their story. We have no answers. We're not there to object. We're not there to react. We're not there to fix or tell them that they're wrong. Women are better than this than men. And I think that has to happen. And it can happen simultaneously.
Rule number 7 is be with the right people.
One of my dearest friends, he's in the military. He's a senior officer in the U.S. Air Force. It's active duty still. And I remember the first time he called me brother, which in the military is a big deal. You and I have colleagues and coworkers. They have brothers and sisters. And so they call each other brother and they call each other sister. And it's an amazing thing. And I remember the first time he said, all right, brother, I'll talk to you later. Or, hey, brother. And I was like, that means the relationship was different now, And he's a warrior. I mean, he's hardcore. He's an amazing human being. And when we get off the phone, he'll say, I love you, Or he'll text me and say, I miss you. Not just miss you, I miss you, which is way more vulnerable, And it's deeply human. And he and I are, we call each other and say, I'm struggling or I'm stuck. And sometimes it's business. I just need your opinion. But sometimes it's personal. Sometimes it's frustration. Can I talk to you? I'm so freaking frustrated. But to foster those relationships, and those relationships take a lot of work to get to. They don't just show up, and they do require risk. At some point you open up a little bit, but to have those kinds of friendships, I think, are absolutely essential to being what we would call a high performance human being. I don't think you can be a high performance by yourself. I don't think it exists. And anybody who does they're either not as high performing as they think they are, or they are high performing, but at tremendous cost. They're lonely. They need pills to start the day. They have other issues. They'll have health issues later in life. I think if you choose to be quote unquote high performing by yourself, it comes at a cost that I think is not worth it.
Rule number 8 is engage in uncomfortable conversations.
The skill of having an uncomfortable conversation is essential. This is how I do them. In fact, I just had one recently with a friend, and it went like this. I need to have an uncomfortable conversation with you. By stating what's about to happen, it lets the person take a deep breath and know what's about to happen is leaning into tension. It also lets them be prepared and be a little less defensive. If you don't trust your skills on how to have an uncomfortable conversation, then say something like this. I need to have an uncomfortable conversation with you. I'm afraid of having this conversation because I'm afraid that I'll say the wrong thing or it'll come out the wrong way and make things worse. So please be patient with me as I try to fumble through this and get out what I need to tell you. But it's more important to me that I have this conversation with you and try and address this situation than avoid it, because this relationship matters to me and I want to go through this with you. Can we have that conversation? And I always do that. I always ask permission. Can we have that conversation? Can I have this conversation with you now? Because they may not be in the mindset for it. They may say, yes, I want to have this conversation, but can we have it in an hour, right? So as opposed to being sprung on them. So I have to have an uncomfortable conversation with you. Can I have it now? Yes. Okay. Now you want to engage in something called FBI. It's just a mnemonic. You can do it in any order, but you have to have all three. Your feelings, the behavior that made you feel that way, and the potential impact if the behavior doesn't change. Be as specific as you can. Feelings. Do better than happy, sad, angry. I'm really frustrated, or I was put on edge, or I'm feeling distant from you, or I'm uncomfortable because. Then label the behavior that they did that made you feel that way. And again, be really, really specific. Avoid things like you always ... because they'll tell you the one time that they didn't, and now you're backpedaling. Pick the most egregious or the most recent one and talk about that situation and how whatever they did made you feel a certain way, and your fear that if that continues, or if it's not goes unaddressed, that something will happen. Maybe, there'll always be tension between us and the relationship will break. And that's exactly what I did with my friend. It's a relatively new friend. Something happened that made it uncomfortable. I said, I need to have an uncomfortable conversation with you. Just fumble through this with me. I don't want to, but this relationship matters to me, and so I want to have this conversation. I addressed what the situation was, and then I said, my fear is that if you and I don't lean into this now, that this little friendship, this sprouting of a friendship that we're having will get destroyed, and I would actually rather see it grow. And we had a very uncomfortable conversation, and it turned out to be fantastic because we ended up opening up to each other and revealing various insecurities and fears that were both triggered by each other. And it was just fantastic. And the relationship is even better now than it was before. So please, please, please practice and learn the skill of having uncomfortable conversations. And the way you're going to practice them is by actually having them.
Number 9 is learn to deal with criticism.
If you talk to an artist and say, why do you paint? Why do you dance? They don't understand the question. The answer they give is, I can't not, right? There's compulsion. And not all ideas have compulsion. They don't feed our souls. And, I think for and probably shared by a lot of people in this room, the question is what ideas should we be stubborn with, and what ideas should we know when to quit? And I think it's often a debate. Like, you have to know when to quit, and you should never quit. And I think the answer is if you can't stop thinking about it, if the idea has so much soul, if it just compels you, those are the ones that we never quit, where the other ones, sure, you can sort of figure out a time to walk away. And that is what this became for me. It was something I couldn't not do. And when you have that kind of belief in something, desperate belief, and people have it in their families, they have it in their faith, they have desperate belief in something. The criticism becomes part of the fun, frankly. The story you're talking about is true. It happened in the early days when I was talking about Start With Why. I was on a stage talking to a fairly large group of entrepreneurs and business owners, and the very first, it wasn't a question, the very first statement made when we went into Q&A, a guy just with the microphone said, I think you're naive. I don't think you've never run a multi-billion-dollar company. I think your ideas are useless in the real world, and I don't think it'll ever work. And my answer was, so don't do it. Next question. And it's not because I was being difficult. It's because I never saw my job to convince people. Because I don't think I'm right. And I don't think that I have answers. I think I have a point of view. That's all. And so I'm simply sharing my point of view. And if you don't share my point of view, I'm totally fine with that. You know, if you want to run your business your way, you run it your way. I just think business could run this way. And so I never took it personally, quite frankly, when I got comments like that or when they questioned my credentials or anything like that.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is inspire others.
I like to think that our job as leaders is not to motivate people, but to inspire them. I believe in hiring motivated people and then giving them something to work towards. We can motivate people all kinds of ways with carrots and sticks, incentives or disincentives. But inspiration is something different. It's the pursuit of something larger than ourselves, feeling like we're a community, feeling like we're doing something together. And you can see this. The most successful organizations, we look to our colleagues and our coworkers and we trust each other. We feel like we have to do this together, compared to an organization where there's poor leadership and it's only external motivations like money or bonuses, and everybody sort of is in it for themselves. They may like each other, but they're not incentivized or desired to help each other. So that is the job of leadership. Leadership is responsible for inspiring the people. So there's multiple things. Number one, vision. Where are you going? It's like trying to get people to get into a car with you, but not telling them where we're going. You're more likely to get them to get in the car if you tell them where you're going. Vision is where we want to take the organization in terms other than success or customer service, anything like that. But literally, how do we imagine a world that doesn't exist? This is what vision is. That's why we call it vision. We can see it in our imaginations. Another part of it is the ability to communicate. Believe it or not, communication is a huge part of good leadership. We're social animals. Mm-hmm. The way we express love or friendship is with words. And so too, good leaders find words that capture their vision, but also make people feel seen and heard. And then that's the third thing, empathy. Mm-hmm. People are human beings. We all want to be seen, heard, understood. We all want to feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves. Mm-hmm. We want to be seen as human beings. We have ambitions and egos, and our good leaders, they know all of that and they consider that.
Tell me how important it is for you and me and everybody in this audience to be happy leaders.
I don't like the term happiness. I like the term fulfillment. I like the term joy. You know, happiness to me is something that is fleeting. And you can have happiness because you win the piece of business, or you hit your numbers, or you go see a movie, and happiness is wonderful and it's great, and then it goes away. You know, it doesn't last. Where deep fulfillment, like love,
meaning,
purpose, all of that kind of stuff.
Or you could say the why.
The why, yeah,
as it were.
But deep fulfillment, I think, is a much higher standard. Let me equate it to like, you don't like your kids every day, but you love your kids every day. You know, it's that kind of thing.
This is true.
Yeah.
This is true.
And so...
Deep truth, friend.
You don't have to be happy every day, but you can be fulfilled every day. You don't have to like your job every day, but you can love your job every day. And I think that people confuse the two. And people are seeking happiness in their work, and they're doing it through all the ways you would think they would do it in short-term things. So like, you know, and you see it the way we lead young people too, which is we put in free food and bean bags and all these fun things at the office because we want to make our employees happy, and it absolutely works. It just doesn't make them fulfilled, and they still are unhappy and they still quit, or they still are unfulfilled and they still quit. And I think this is the problem. I think we've confused the terms because they're not the same. So I'm more interested in people finding deep fulfillment in their work, and I'm sure they will find happiness throughout that also. Understanding the game we're playing.
this game called work, or life, or love, or whichever one you want, or all of them. In game theory, there are two kinds of games. There are finite games and there are infinite games. A finite game is defined as known players, fixed rules, and an agreed upon objective. Baseball. We all agree what the rules are, and at the end of 9 innings, whoever has more runs, we declare the winner and the game is over. No one ever says, wait, if we can just play 3 more innings, I know we can come back and win. Doesn't happen, right? You have winners and you have losers, right? Then there's an infinite game. An infinite game is defined as known and unknown players. The rules are changeable, and the objective is to keep the game in play, to perpetuate the game. When you pit a finite player versus a finite player, the system is stable. Baseball is stable. When you pit an infinite player versus an infinite player, the system is also stable. The Cold War was stable because there can be no winners and losers. It doesn't exist. That's not a scenario we want. And so you keep the game in play to keep it stable. And in an infinite game, because there are no winners or losers, what happens is players drop out when they run out of the will or the resources to play. And then they're replaced by other players. The game perpetuates. The players change out. Problems arise when you pit a finite player versus an infinite player. Because the finite player is playing to win, and the infinite player is playing to stay in the game. And the finite player will always get frustrated. They will find themselves in quagmire. This was the United States and Vietnam. We were fighting to win. They were fighting for their lives. This was the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. They were fighting to beat the Mujahideen. The Mujahideen would fight for as long as was necessary. Now, let's look at the game of business. The game of business is, by its very definition, an infinite game. It has pre-existed before every single company on this planet ever existed, and it will outlast every single company on this planet. But if you listen to the words of most companies, they don't know the game they're in. You listen to companies, they want to be number one. Based on what metrics? Based on what time frames? Revenues? Market share? Square footage? Number of employees? Based on a quarter, a year? 5 years? 10 years? 50 years? I didn't agree to those standards. You can't suddenly just arbitrarily say we're number one. No one else agreed to the standards. It's nonsense to beat our competition. Based on what? And they study their competition, trying to outdo their competition. And yet I've never heard of a company that's taken down by the competitors they know. They're always taken down by the competitors they don't know. Do you think MySpace knew that Facebook existed? They were worried about Friendster. You can't make strategic decisions from studying your competition. You can make tactical decisions from studying your competition, but not strategic decisions. But when you listen to the way most companies play the game, they're in the wrong game. That's why they get frustrated. The great organizations understand that they're playing to stay in the game.
So every time there's been new technology, we have adapted and changed, of course. I remember, this is going to date me now, but I used to have like a mind like a steel trap for phone numbers. I knew everybody's phone numbers. I knew 10, 50, 100 phone numbers, like family, friends. I just knew all phone numbers. And then for my birthday, I got a Casio digital diary with 2K of memory. And I was able to put all my phone numbers in there. Now, I know my phone number and I know my sister's phone number, and that's it. I don't even know my best friend's phone number. I just type in their names in my phone. My mind literally doesn't work that way anymore because the technology did the work for me. And my brain said, fine, screw you. You got the technology, you don't need me. So yes, of course, there are going to be adaptations. You know, the Iliad, for example, was a book that we read in high school or college that's this big. That was handed down by storytelling over generations until we figured out the printing press. And now we can't remember stories that long. We just can't do it. So will our minds adjust thanks to AI and ChatGPT? Of course. For better and for worse, yes, we will adapt.
Vulnerable sounds weak, right? But vulnerability simply is the expression of doubt or uncertainty sometimes. You know, saying, I don't know is vulnerable, right? Saying this is going to be difficult is vulnerable. I think a lot of leaders pretend they have all the answers or pretend that they have no uncertainty. And of course, that's nonsense, because we all have uncertainty and we all have doubt. Now you can't come to work and go, oh my God, the whole thing's gonna crash. That's just equally unrealistic. But when you have a company that allows for people to feel vulnerable, that means someone can raise their hand and say, I made a mistake, or I need help, or I don't understand, or I'm having trouble at home and it's affecting my work, or I'm scared, without any fear of humiliation or retribution, but rather they say it with confidence that someone will rush to support them. And the way that you encourage that kind of culture is that the leaders have to set the example. And so during COVID, when I was when I was struggling, as we all went through a period of mental struggle, I said to my team, I'm off my game. I'm struggling. It's getting to me, and I just need your help and your patience to that I may be pretty slow to respond and not very effective for now. And I said that. And that allowed other people to speak up so that we could be there for them. But if I pretended that everything was fine and everything was good the whole time, then everybody's going to pretend everything's fine and everything's good. And then how can we be there to support each other until they crash? Mm-hmm. So I think vulnerability is just being a little more open. And the irony is it takes tremendous courage and strength to express vulnerability. It's actually strong to be vulnerable. It actually is very weak to pretend that everything's fine.
At the end of the day, when you're young and junior in your career, it's the most confusing, exciting, wonderful, awful day of your life, right? Because now it's you. It's life's journey, right? You work your way up to 8th grade and you have to start again at 9th grade. And you work your way up to senior and you have to start again as a freshman. You work your way up and you grad, and then now you're nothing again. But I think there are too many people who graduate school thinking that they have to have it all figured out on day one.
Yes.
And you don't. Because there's something wonderful about being junior inside a company, right? You probably don't have as many responsibilities as other people. You may or may not have a spouse. You probably don't have kids. The vast majority of people don't have kids at this time. In other words, you can do anything. You can go try stuff out. Also, your cost of living is a lot lower. And you can't really break anything at a company and bring the company down. This is the best, if you're senior and you make a bad decision, you can break the whole company. When you're junior and you make a bad decision, maybe you'll lose a little bit of money, right? There's not much you can really do that'll break the company. And so this is an amazing opportunity to practice and learn and practice and learn. Find a mentor. And a mentor is not someone who is your champion, who will put in a good word for you so you get the promotion.
Right.
A mentor is somebody who's probably not even at your company. Mm-hmm. And if they are at your company, they don't have to be in your chain of command. Mm-hmm. There's somebody who likes you and you like them, and they believe in you, and they see maybe a little bit of themselves in you, and they want to see you do well. And they give you candid and honest advice. In other words, come to learn, come to be a better version of yourself. Too many people start off trying to prove that they are worthy of being there, trying to prove that they should be in charge, and yet everybody knows that you have no experience. We know. We saw your resume. Your resume says your GPA and what you graduated. You have no jobs.
Right.
You wrote it down here. Cafeteria is not like the thing we're thinking of. We took a bet on you because we liked you and you're a nice kid and we tried to form it, but we don't know. You got no experience.
Right.
So this is the best time to try things out and experiment and push the boundaries and make sure you're making friends and make sure you're taking care of others and make sure you find a mentor and enjoy the journey. If you take that route, you're more likely to be successful than not.
Purpose is foundational. It's not like I want to be the best or I want to be number one or I want to, those things are good and important and goals are valid and valuable. But that's not the reason you get out of bed in the morning. The reason your spouse loves you is not because you're the top salesperson. The reason your friends rely on you is not because of your knowledge of the product. Purpose is foundational, and it absolutely applies at work, because who you are at home and who you are at work should be consistent. That's what we mean by authenticity. If you're different in both of these places, then in one of those two places, you're lying. We want to know who you are and show up as yourself. Now, that doesn't mean we can't be professional at work. Those two are, you can still be professional and be yourself. And fundamentally, When we are ourselves, we connect better, whether it's teammates or people or customers. We connect people like us who share our values and see the world the way we see it. We can't get along with everybody. And a great salesperson knows when there's not a good personality connection, that they'll actually say to somebody else, you take this one. You can close this deal. I won't be able to, or you can get a better deal. And it's understanding that when we show up as our true selves, we're much better able to truly connect with people and inspire them to do the same, by the way. Remember, 100% of customers are people, and 100% of employees are people, and 100% of investors are people. And fundamentally, business is a human industry. If you don't understand people, you don't understand business. And we succeed as people when we work together. We are social animals who need each other. We need each other in hard times. We need each other in good times. And so the better we foster relationships internally and externally, this is the recipe for successful change and, quite frankly, success in anything we do.
The greatest sense of purpose and meaning we can have in our lives is to serve those who serve others. Part of the deal that they made with me when I went, the general said, I want you to go and I want you to come back and tell us your insights. What you saw that we did well, what you saw weak, just tell us your insights. So about 2 weeks after I got home, I went back to Scott Air Force Base and was standing in a room full of all the brass, all the generals, the colonels, all the command from the mobility forces. And they just wanted me to report on what I saw. And I went through everything. And I wasn't sure if I was going to tell them about bringing home this flag draped casket. That was the emotions were very raw still. And I'm not sure I wanted to do it or could do it. And I remembered I was reporting on everything else that I saw and the people I met and the things that I thought were amazing. And I took a pause and I decided to tell the story. And now, the emotions are right on the surface. And I tell the whole story in even more detail than I'm telling you now. And I got to the point where I choked up and I couldn't continue. I couldn't tell the story anymore. Now, if this was the private sector and I was standing on a stage telling this exact story, somebody in private sector would say to me, take your time. They would say, it's okay. That's what they would say to me, right? It's happened. Take your time, right? That's not what happened. I stood there completely choked up. I couldn't speak. And was one voice from the back of the room, the general. And he said, go on. Meaning, go on and we're with you. Right? And that's the difference between private sector and these wonderful people. In private sector, they say to you, take your time as if you're alone. Take all the time you need by yourself. And here, these people who understand what service truly means, they say, go forwards, go on, move forwards, you have no choice, and we will be with you. And that's what I learned from them. When my friends are struggling, I don't say, take your time. When my friends are struggling, I say, go on. When my friends are crying, I say, go on. The underlying message is, and I am here sitting in the mud with you. It is the greatest honor of my life. And because of that experience, that's where the book Leaders Eat Last came from. That experience was the impetus for that book. So when we talk about what the future looks like, I just want to live a life of service. I want to continue to serve those who serve others. And to meet people who live a life of service, I will do anything for them. I think there's an unwritten rule that when you meet someone who's devoted their life to serving those who serve others, that it is our responsibility to serve them. There's an unwritten rule. The reason I do so much pro bono stuff is because when I meet people who are on the side of good, on the side of service, I obey that unwritten agreement that I will be there for you and I will serve you and expect nothing in return. And if you want to bring it full circle back to relationships, when one person shows up in the relationship to serve you, you have the moral responsibility to serve them. Because to serve someone who serves others, they are serving you, which means we have to serve them. I live my life by that code.
It's really easy to be honest. Just tell the truth. And if you tell the truth on a regular basis, we will say you have integrity. That's all it means. These are really basic concepts. So for example, if somebody calls and a secretary picks up the phone and says, Dave's on the phone, and you say, tell him I'm not here. You've just sanctioned lying inside your organization. That's what you've done. You have said that when it suits you, even if these lies are small, you may tell lies. That was dishonest. I went to visit Quantico Marine Base, where the Marine Corps selects their officers. And on the day I was there, true story, I was waiting in a conference room for the colonel in charge of OCS to come and give us a briefing on the base about OCS, about the selection process. And he arrived late. Marines don't ever arrive late. And he showed up late. He came in and apologized. He said, "I'm sorry, we've had an incident with one of our Marines." So I go, "What happened?" You know? He said, "Well, we're considering throwing him out of OCS, which means throwing him out of the Marine Corps." Like, and I'm thinking, what law did he break? What did he do? So I said, "What did he do?" And the colonel said, "He fell asleep on watch." And I said, "That's it?" He fell asleep on watch in the woods of Virginia. You know? I'm like, you guys are tough. He said, and then he explained. He said, "No, you don't understand." He said, when we asked him about it, he denied it. When we asked him about it again, he denied it again. And only when we gave him irrefutable proof did he say, quote, "I want to take responsibility for my actions. The problem we have," he said, "is we believe you take responsibility for your actions at the time you perform your actions, not at the time you get caught." We have another Marine who fell asleep on watch. He admitted it. He got punished. We have no problem with him. And he went on to explain, he says, "You have to understand, I cannot put this Marine in a leadership position where they're responsible for the lives of other Marines, because if they are in a combat situation and his Marines doubt for 1 second that the words coming out of his mouth are anything but the truth, if they believe for 1 second that the words he is speaking are only to make himself look better or cover his own ass, trust will break down in the whole group and people will die." Now, we are not in life and death situations, but the way our minds interpret information that is given to us is in terms of life and death. This is why we don't trust politicians. They tell us the things we want to hear. We don't prima facie disagree with anything we've been told, but we know that they don't believe the things that they're saying. And so we as human beings, we're very, very smart, and this is always ingrained in us. We always make sure just to keep a safe distance from anybody who we don't believe is honest, because if we were to find ourselves in a life and death situation with them, you know what, if I had to gamble, I'm gonna say, won't go with them. When someone is honest, they're willing to tell us good news, they're willing to tell us bad news, they're willing to be upfront with them. Even if it's news that we don't want to hear, even if it's not in our interest, we're okay with it. We actually trust them. Hey, listen, I gotta be honest with you. Your performance has been really bad these days. I love this, we're always taught to give sandwiches. Give them the good news before you get to the bad news, right? So give them something general and generic that they don't believe anyway. Hey, you're really smart. And on this one project that you did that you really completely, like, it's really specific when they give us the negative, right? In other words, we didn't believe the positive in the first place. We knew they were just biding their time to get to the negative. Honesty.
What is existential flexibility? What does it say to us?
So existential flexibility is the capacity to make a 180-degree strategic shift in order to better advance your cause. I call it a capacity because you need two things. There's two prerequisites before you can even make an existential flex. One is you have to have a just cause. In other words, you can't change routes if you don't know where you're going.
Right. Fair enough.
But then you're just going to always choose the fastest road, but you may not get anywhere. And the other thing is you have to have trusting teams, because if you're going to make a profound shift in the way the organization functions or what its strategy is, the metrics are probably going to go down in the short term, and you're probably going to increase the level of stress as the organization changes. And so you need people who go, I understand what the cause is. I see why we're doing this. I'm a part of this. And the team is willing to go through the shared hardship in order to do the right thing for the good of the future. If you don't have the just cause and you don't have the trusting teams, no amount of vision from leadership will, that existential flex will probably fail. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that reveal, and I think unfortunately you're right. I think the church as an industry, if we can be so base about it, but the church as an industry, unfortunately, looks a lot like a lot of other old-fashioned industries. So why is it that Apple Computers, a computer company, disrupted the music industry by inventing, by perfecting the iPod? You know, right. iTunes is really the thing that changed it, right? So why didn't the music industry invent that?
How is it that Netflix, a little startup that came out of nowhere, dominates television and movies? Blockbuster doesn't exist anymore. They're gone. Why didn't the television and movie industry invent Netflix? But they're now copying Netflix and playing catch up. The disruption comes from organizations usually outside of your purview, and you see it all over the place. And I think the church as an industry looks a lot like the music industry, the film industry, the music, the television industries, which is, this is the way we've always done it. This is how we got big. This is how we got successful. This is how we spread our message. This is how we know, this is what I know how to do because this is what I've been doing for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And so either I'm afraid to change because I only know how to do this, or this made me successful and yet I cannot accept what got me here won't get me there. And I also am, the world around me is changing. Technology is changing, politics are changing, culture is changing, and I can't do what I used to do. Like Sears can't keep sending out catalogs. It's not the world we live in anymore. They were the most innovative company in the world when that was a thing. And so the question is, how do you adapt for the world that we live in?
We keep referring to others in our space as competitors. But the problem with the idea of a competitor is a competitor is someone we set out to beat, right? And so it's setting up the wrong mindset. Rather, we want to have rivals who are worthy of comparison. And their strengths reveal to us our weaknesses. And by learning our weaknesses, we learn where we can improve. Because remember, the infinite game ultimately is a game of constant improvement. There is no such thing as best. There is only better. That's all there ever is. But if you don't know your blind spots and you don't know where you're weak, how can you improve? That is the value of the other players in your industry. That is the value of the other people on your own team. You can have a worthy rival that you work with. We've all worked with somebody that we hate, that everybody else likes, and they got a promotion and we were pissed off, right? The odds are really high that they have some talent or ability that is revealing to us a weakness that we have, and it's so much easier to hate them than to take a hard look at ourselves in the mirror and then work on whatever we see, right? You don't have to like or agree with your worthy rivals, but you have to be grateful for their existence, and we have to work on the things that it reveals. You have to have worthy rivals, and you get to pick them. When we talk about safe, we're talking about psychologically. That's right. Yeah. And you can be psychologically safe and still trip over a cord. That's right. Yeah. So it's a great story. I had a business trip to Las Vegas a bunch of years ago, and the client was very generous and put me up at the Four Seasons, which is a lovely hotel. And the reason it's lovely is not because of the fancy beds. Any hotel can buy a fancy bed. It's because of the people who work there. That when you roam the halls, and somebody says hello, you get the distinct feeling that they wanted to say hello, not that they were told to say hello. We're highly attuned social animals. We can tell the difference. I mean, it's your idea of being the Nordstroms. It's like people can tell the difference whether they're forced to give good service or they want to give good service. Anyway, they happened to have a coffee bar at the Four Seasons in Las Vegas. And one afternoon, I went and bought myself a cup of coffee. And the barista working that day was a kid named Noah. Noah was funny and engaging and charming, and I stood there for far too long just to buy a cup of coffee. And so, as is my nature, I asked Noah, do you like your job? And without skipping a beat, Noah said, I love my job. Now, in my line of work, that's significant, because like is rational, right? I like the people, I like the challenge, I get paid well, I like my job. Love is emotional, it's a higher order connection. Like, do you love your wife? I like her a lot, right? It's different. Right. It's not the same, right? So Noah said, I love my job. So immediately my ears perk up. This kid has an emotional connection to his job. So I followed up and I said, can you tell me specifically what the Four Seasons is doing that you would say to me, you love your job? And without skipping a beat, Noah said, throughout the day, managers will walk past me and ask me if there's anything that I need to do my job better, anything they can do for me. Not just my manager, any manager. And then he said, I also work at Caesar's Palace. And there, the managers walk around and just catch us when we're doing things wrong. There, they're just trying to drive performance. He says, there, I just keep my head below the radar. I just want to get through the day and collect my paycheck. And then he said something magical. He said, only at the 4 seasons do I feel I can be myself. So think about that for a second. This is the exact same human being, right, in 2 different jobs, and yet our experience of him will be profoundly different, not because of him, but because of the leadership environment in which he works. In one experience, it'll be amazing. In one, it'll be terrible, right?
That's it.
And I think so often, I hear this all the time, leaders ask, how do I get the most out of my people? Well, people aren't a towel. You don't wring them out, right? How do I get the most out of them? It's a flawed question when it comes to leadership. The question is how do I create an environment in which my people can work at their natural best? And the 4 Seasons has figured that out, right? It's by giving him agency. It's by giving him control to do the job that he wants to do the way he wants to do it, and checking in to make sure that leadership isn't there to do his job for him or to overly control, but to offer guidelines, but also offer support. And the same goes in any profession. You can take a cop in one agency who will be high-performing, a valuable member of the team, a valuable member of the community because of the culture. You can change the agency they work for, and they can be a terrible member of the team because of the leadership environment in which they work.
Because you made it this far in a video, I want to celebrate you. Most people start and don't finish. Most people never actually follow through. Most people say they want something, but they don't ever do the work to actually get it. But you are different. You are special. Believe Nation, you made it here all the way to the end, and I love you. So as a special celebration, if you put a hashtag believe down in the comments below on this video, I will showcase you and celebrate you somewhere on the screen in a future video because you are awesome. For 10 more amazing rules from Brendan Burchard, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
The habits that everyone wants to talk about in the popular literature or books is like, these small habits or atomic habits or automatic habits or unconscious habits. Those are valuable. Those are very important. But high performance requires deliberate habits. A deliberate habit